Hi, I'm Jan Ozer. I'm here today with Fred Dawson, an industry journalist and a principal at Dawson Communications, where he provides consulting and writing services to broadband industry suppliers respecting technologies and trends shaping the evolution of electronic media. We're here to talk about a white paper Fred just wrote for a company called MotionSpell entitled GPAC Ultramedia Technology Breaks Barriers to Next-Gen Streaming. Thanks for joining me, Fred.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure.
So, a lot to unpack in the title. Before we get into the details, who was this white paper written for and who should be thinking about downloading it?
It's really for anyone who's involved in making decisions about spending money on streaming, commercial value streaming, or developers who are engaged in making streaming work.
Okay, give us a one paragraph overview of the white paper.
Well, it's addressing the fact that the entire streaming industry, uh, the media and entertainment aspects of it, is in a massive margin squeeze. And I mean, it's been widely noted, streaming media, and its summary of survey summary from last year on streaming noted that that was the overwhelming issue for people containing costs. And as a matter of fact, the cost containment is a two-pronged challenge because people want to reduce their costs
Hmm.
because of that margin squeeze, but that margin squeeze is a function of all the competition that is forcing people to find more innovative ways to create new user experiences, which means expanding on the capabilities of the streaming infrastructure. So this white paper illuminates what is known as GPAC, an open stack protocol that is administered through MotionSpell. And with the aid of MotionSpell, actually is producing some pretty marvelous results in terms of solving both ends of that challenge.
Okay, so let's dig in a bit. Tell me more about GPAC. What is it? What does it do?
Well, it's addressing the whole packaging and encoding elements of streaming. Um, in in the old days, streaming in the old days when streaming started taking off, um, it was relatively simple. There was just on-demand usage primarily, and things were streamed out with basic content and not much else. Um, Today, it's just phrased on the amount of difficulties that are involved, complexities that are involved in both encoding and packaging content for delivering to mass audiences is overwhelming from the standpoint of making those old systems work and updating them, or alternatively finding the many new systems that are out there on the market that are meant to address these things and having to pay for them. And that is what this white paper is meant to really address, is how you can get around those costs, but still have the facility to do just about anything you're going to need to do now or in the future with streaming infrastructure over HTTP. This is very much devoted to the HTTP environment, and making these things that people are looking for works in that environment.
Okay, so GPAC is an open source packager and encoder. What is Ultramedia?
Ultramedia is just a brand name that was attached to the GPAC. Ultramedia is meant to imply um, applications that are developed through the aid of motion still.
Okay, and closing the loop, who is MotionSpell?
Motion Bell is actually run by a gentleman, Ramon Boku, who is one of the founders, the primary founder of the whole GPAC initiative, which goes back over 20 years. And he and a coterie of fellow developers working out of France, the Technical Institute in Paris, began putting together all these different protocols that they felt were the best ways of executing things that needed to be done. Back then, the priority was on just simply simplifying the costs of using CDNs. It expanded from there and now encompasses the whole ecosystem of streaming applications.
Okay. And Motion Spell, I guess they provide consulting services that use Ultramedia and slash GPAC. Is that kind of
Yeah,
the
they basically take GPAC to their customers and they put it to use to do what those customers want with precision as to the very specific needs they have. And so it's a turnkey service. And they basically are putting GPAC to use in ways that they understand and can do relatively quickly that otherwise would take people a long time and involve a lot of developers and may or may not produce the results you want. It's a very complex system because it's designed to address every need there is in streaming from the packaging and encoding standpoints. And it's not meant to replace existing encoders. It works with existing encoders if the users want to do that, but it also works with FF MPEG if you want to develop um, your own encoding, and that's part of the service offered by Lotus Bell is develop those encoding capabilities if you so desire.
Okay. Looking at the white paper, you spent a lot of time on cost. So could you elaborate on how GPAC technology addresses the cost concerns that you raised and I guess identify some of the costs that you did raise in the white paper?
Well, sure. Looking at the primary situations has to do with the fact that people are paying through the nose for the use of turnkey systems. Um, At one time, when they were kind of getting started, these systems were considered to be perfectly economical because the scaling wasn't that big, the audiences weren't that big. But now the usage factor with hundreds of thousands, millions of users on these streaming services has just blown through the roof. And and so the surveys that I cite in the white paper are pointing to a massive shift now toward do-it-yourself efforts to supplant these turnkey systems in the interest of saving money. You still have to use, if you're not using your own premises equipment, still have to use the cloud, but you're not paying those usage licensing fees that if you're doing it yourself. And that's one of the advantages of GPAC is it's open source. So from the standpoint of actually using the protocols, there's no cost. The only usage fees come in if you want to do it in a commercial way. And that entails either licensing it so you can put your own brand on it rather than calling it GPAC, and uh, you can prevent people from reverse engineering your innovative uses of GPAC, and so you can do it all under the hood and preserve your intellectual property and the use of it. And the other aspect to it, of course, is that licensing is administered solely by Motion Still. And if you want to expedite the use of the whole thing, then you pay them um, their consulting fees to actually put the whole thing to use and build whatever you want to have built. But net, it's a vast reduction in cost for doing the best possible things you want to do.
So the white paper mentions that many industry players, including Netflix, with Motion Spell's assistance, have adopted GPAC to streamline their streaming processes. What other clients did you write about in the white paper, and why did they use Motion Spell rather than doing it themselves with GPAC?
Well, I just mentioned a handful, three actually, for the reasons of the innovative ways in which they do it. They're representative of a very large growing coterie. Interestingly, IBC there's going to be one of the accelerator sessions at IBC is put on by Comcast, and they're looking to create a very, very low latency, high performance approach to streaming live sports. And so this accelerator session is going to be all about how they're doing that, and they're bringing feedback into play on that process. Um, so where Netflix is concerned, it's they have legions of developers, and they're renowned for developing really innovative things. Yet they decided to retain Motion's Bill to do this for them. Um, and what they did was when they needed to convert from being a strictly on-demand streaming service to one that did linear streaming and advertising, then they had to completely revamp their whole infrastructure. And by doing it with the GPAC with Motion Still's help, they were able to do that without making any major changes, just doing additional things and rejiggering things internally, but not disrupting anything. And now they have in place something that they can use to continue evolving their service and go wherever they want to with the service, and it will now operate according to whatever those applications are. So it was a major landmark change in how they do things. And the others, I think Jason Brandon's using not voice and spell, but using GPAC, and it's an interesting way that they're doing. But they saved up to 90% on their streaming costs because they figured out a way to put GPAC to use in cases where you don't need full real-time square full video streaming. You can go to progressive streaming, the precursor to live streaming that used to be you downloaded 2 bytes and started watching, and then it kept downloading as you kept watching. And so by using GPAC to determine which content is best able to be used in that way without it diminishing user experience, they've made that kind of savings in their streaming costs. 90% is what they say. So the other one that I cite in the white paper is the company acquired by Cinemedia a couple of years ago. Cinemedia being, of course, one of the larger providers of streaming infrastructure in the marketplace, and they bought this company called Cortex, and because they had taken GPAC, and this was with Bush's Bell's Go, and created this environment where essentially you can spin up any kind of service you want using available resources as they exist in the cloud, applying that software into those resources and have it all do just about anything you want as far as the type of streaming you will notify. And so Cinemedia has bought that and is putting it to good use in their markets.
Okay. Can you elaborate on how GPAC's modular filter-based architecture provides a competitive advantage today?
Yeah, basically the secret sauce is that all of these protocols that the DPAC developers identified as being the best things to do very, very specific incremental elements of packaging and coding, all of those protocols, there's about 30 of them, could be applied in ways that were in pipelines to do specific things on an aggregated basis, applying whatever elements in that protocol stack were essential to that specific application. And so they basically created a way that you can build these pipelines so that all the applications that you need are being met through the use of those protocols in that specific application environment. And that can be many, many, many pipelines to do all kinds of things that are involved in packaging and encoding. So Once that's built, then you eliminate duplicative processes. You're able to have one packaging that can do everything for you. You don't need to be worried about whether the packaging you're using can do just in time um, packaging for specific applications. It will do that. You just have to tell it to do that, and put in the necessary protocols that will support whatever it is you're looking to do. Whether it's being able to add multiple types of captions based on language and destination, whether it's being able to add a whole lot of specific graphics for illustrating things of interest to a personalized basis of interest to a user, something that's commonly done in sports now with stats and showing how your fantasy team is performing, that kind of thing, as you're watching the live sports. Bringing all this stuff in, and then of course exercising the biggest thing that just-in-time packaging is used for now is server-side dynamic advertising, and that has now become the dominant format, according to some of the statistics I cite from various research organizations. Since it's SSAI, server-side advertising insertion, is now the dominant mode of applying advertising and streaming. And that's because people want addressable advertising. And they want to be able to target the advertising, whether it's around certain geographic areas or down to demographic elements, defining individuals, however they want to do it. And service-side ad insertion allows you to put it in that stream on a just-in-time basis, closer to the end users where it's being unicast to a specific user. And that now is dominating the streaming marketplace in terms of the revenue generation. Advertising is now surged beyond subscription revenues, and addressable advertising is now the dominant form of advertising in terms of spend. All this has happened in the flash. I mean, I was writing 3 years ago about how eventually addressability was going to take over, but there were all these problems to solve. And programmatic took off, and man, it's just been, and that's where FAST came from. All the free advertising support that streaming services primarily grew out of the fact that now you could do programmatic advertising and target your users, and that drove up the value of the advertising that made free service more feasible. So these transformations have really complicated the packaging business, to say the least. And so GPAC is ideal if you can figure out how to use it for creating a solution that will give you the packaging flexibility that you need going forward.
Okay, nice. You also talk a lot about latency being a key issue, particularly in sports. How does GPAC's encoding and packaging approach reduce streaming latency?
Simply by eliminating duplications. One of the primary things that you can do, and of course this is being done by a lot of commercial streaming platforms now, that you can use GPAC to build your own version of this, where essentially you don't have to store all your files in multiple profiles to suit the adaptive bit rate profiles that go out there when you stream on AVR. Now, you can just have a mezzanine file, and it could be sent out on demand when any user wants it, and the transcoding into the precise profile, AVR profiles necessary for that particular end user application are done instantly. And so that saves you all that storage cost. So that's one big element to it. Another big element to it is analogous from the standpoint of a lot of the content. The majority of content is not stuff you want to run through a CDN, but people just do it because it just become contemplates? Well, if you have a means of segmenting out what you don't really need to send through a CDN and have locally cached because it's content that's not all that used, and you were talking about on-demand content, of course, then this system can determine which content doesn't need to be cached and which does, and therefore save you a ton of money on the caching. Um, so those are some of the ways in the encoding process that it saves money. On the packaging side, it's simply saving money by consolidating everything and giving you a better sense of performance, so that essentially you're able to oversee and manage your performance in a uniform packaging way that saves you a lot of money in terms of specific monitoring processes and maintenance processes and just the oversight necessary when we're dealing with a lot of different packages. So those those things are not only saving money, they're saving on latency, because the less encoding you have to do, the faster things are. The more efficient your packaging is, the lower your latency. So these elements in the latency side are not dominant factors in why you would choose to use GPAC. They're ancillary benefits. Where it does get interesting is the fact that now in the HTTP vein, you have these new protocols emerging, uh, some of which is now going into commercial use, including the um, uh, chunking process that's used to make um, packaging using CMAP, that's streaming over um, everything dash and HLS uh, much faster uh, than you would, because you're using these very small chunks without waiting for the larger segments to materialize and send them out. And then there's also in the HTTP vein the development of Quick, and that was a Google invention that has now become standardized. And Quick uses UDP as opposed to TCP as your main primary means of delivering, which means you're not doing any buffering. And it uses forward error correction and a lot of exotic technologies to overcome the blockage that TCP was designed to overcome with UDP. Now you can use UDP and stuff goes out there without all the rebuffering. So that cuts way down your latency. So Quick has now become the only way that HTTP 3 version 3 works. It's separate from TCP, doesn't use TCP anymore, and then it's now starting to move into the marketplace. The great thing about GPAC is you can accommodate all these different generations and versions of things through a single package, so that where there's opportunities to put Quick into motion, you use Quick and you get that latency benefit. And right now, the end-to-end performance on HTTP3, based on tests that I've seen, running in the 2-second thing and then over long distances. Um, and and uh, and that's what this whole thing, the podcast, is about, is putting Quick to use, if the accelerator I was talking about. And that's why they're using DPAC, or one of the reasons. So having that flexibility to be able to jump on these new advances in lowering latency is another big advantage of CPAC.
Okay. How does GPAC enable some of the personalization you talked about a few moments ago, where you see your football scores coming up and your fantasy scores? I
Well,
mean,
it doesn't enable those things. It simply streamlines the packaging that puts those things in. I mean, basically, those things are coming over separate streams, and they've got to be combined at the point of packaging, which is at the edge when you're talking about a unicast out to individual users. So all of these elements that are coming in add huge amount of complexity to the packaging process. They all have to be perfectly prone safe and lined up So it's just some of the same stuff that you originally had to do with packaging audio and video. Now you've got captions and subtitles, and you've got individualized statistics, and whatever else you want to throw in there in addition to the advertising that is incremental and personalized and just in time. So those are very, very difficult things to do to pull off in a packaging environment. And especially if you're trying to do it yourself. A lot of these commercial systems have advanced to where they are handling this stuff. But again, the costs are astronomical, comparatively speaking. And so that's weighing on people in terms of how they go about it. But these advantages that GPAC brings in terms of the flexibilities around these new generations of streaming protocols, low latency protocols, those really haven't been put into play to the degree of flexibility by the commercial systems that you can do with GPAC. So it's got that advantage right now.
Okay, and probably similar comments relating to XR and spatial computing, some of the advanced technologies that you talked
Exactly.
about.
Yeah, it just gets dicier there. And frankly, it's the jury's still out on how far you're going to be able to go with HTTP there because, and this applies to gaming. When you get down to being able to have people interact, especially if they're not just using avatars and they're using real video and real images and they're interacting like we are in this call. We're not using HTTP to do this. And so that starts to move beyond the domain of HTTP. But to the extent that there are many things in play now that don't require that, sub whatever it is, 100 millisecond end-to-end latency in the XR domain, and there's plenty that doesn't. A lot of AR applications and all kinds of things having to do with just how a socialized uh, virtual reality environment works, you can have higher latencies and it works fine. And that includes too this whole idea of a 360-degree view of events. Um, that's now become something that is being pushed through VR fairly commonly. This last Olympics, uh, whatever used that. Well, one before actually used it to an even greater extent. Uh, and so the ability to see any point in the stadium and take and see what's going on from any angle is now facilitated with lower latency. And that certainly can be accommodated through HTTP streaming and is. So that's another big use for it.
Okay, perfect. That's all I have. Where can a listener download the white paper?
Well, go to Motion Spell. It's motionspell.com. Um, that's where the white paper is hosted, and it's also where you go to really learn about GPAC and how to use it. And you don't have to go there thinking you're going to have to spend on Motion Spell to do your whole project. If you want to do your project and use GPAC, you can get instructions from them free of charge in terms of the documentation, and you can also, at a very low cost, get a license to do it commercially with your own branding and that sort of thing. So it's a good resource for however you want to use GPAC.
Okay, listen, thanks for taking the time to talk with me.
Yeah, sure. I enjoyed it. Thank you.